When I was younger, I was way more active than I am today. I played volleyball through high school. I skipped university. You'll hear why in this episode. And I started playing beach volleyball again in my early 30s and up until now. And so I find this episode fascinating because what happened to me, and I think what's happened to most of us, is we get an injury, or we're afraid of getting an injury. We're told that, we're a little more brittle, we're a little more fragile than we used to be, and we tend to throw in the towel on being athletic and participating in sports, especially team sports, especially contact team sports. But more and more, especially post-pandemic, I'm seeing women re-engaging with their athletic side. Women in my community are curling, pickleball is huge right now, ball hockey, and soccer. So I was really excited to be introduced to Brandi Mitchell, who is the founder of San Diego Soccer Women. This is an organization that she has started to really inspire women to either learn how to play soccer or get back on the field after years of maybe not participating due to, lifestyle issues, could be raising a young family, could be job, could be career, but mostly it's fear. It's fear that we are too old to do this. So Brandy's comments during this episode are really uplifting for me. She is working with women who are over 60, over 70, and sometimes over 80, who are either former soccer athletes and are back at it, or have continued all the way through, or are just learning the sport. Brandy's also going to be coming to Canada for the Good Games, which is taking place in Guelph, Ontario, and I'll share information of that. You're going to see women of all age groups participating in this sort of sports festival that I've spoken about before. I'm inspired to go and see and meet these athletes. These aren't a bunch of women just going out there and kicking a ball around. In fact, most of them can kick my ass. Um, and they're doing it because they don't believe they are limitations to them continuing with sports. They're doing it because they know that their bodies are strong. And the women that are out there, they are given it and they know the challenges, they know the risks, and they're still doing it. And Brandy talks in great length about, studies behind this and why this is important for us to know that our bodies don't stop and we don't need to throw in the towel after a certain age, like say 40. We've got to keep our bodies strong, we've got to keep them moving. I'm really excited to talk to Brandy about this. She has really changed the way I think about this. I think she's going to change your mind about participating in sports. And I'm going to share some really cool videos that Brandy has of older women playing sports that have garnered millions of views, even by professional athletes, because we love to see women growing older and continuing to kick ass. So tune in to Brandi Mitchell. Brandy, hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Jackie?
I'm great. You're joining me from San Diego, sunny San Diego. And I heard you might be coming to Canada soon. Is that right?
Yes, gosh, the Good Games, this event it's a sports festival for ages mainly 30 and older, which is a lot of what I do is working with athletes 30 and older. And we're used to the Masters Games and some of the other large organizations that are offering these festivals that are kind of like the Olympics for older adults, right? But a couple of years ago, I had been working with one of the directors there to try to bring women's soccer to the event, and of course, the pandemic hit. And fortunately, we were able to get everything together to do it for this year. So she already had the event running; it was going great. But adding women's soccer was the key. So I'm looking forward to being up there to see all the hard work and all the recruiting and all the communication come into an actual tournament.
Absolutely. I am lucky to know Elena from a mutual friend, and I've met her quite a few times. I love her. She is such a strong force. And she's like, ever since I've met her, she's always talked about the importance of women in sports, but not just, not just in sports in general, but continuing on with sports and sort of ignoring all of what society tells us about throwing in the towel after a certain age. Me personally, I have a bit of a reputation with my friends over the last couple of years for breaking
Yeah.
bones, which I've never ever done before. And like I played volleyball for 20 years, never broke a
Yeah.
bone.
Okay.
Yeah. So I found that that happened at the beginning of the pandemic, and I found that I was really hesitant after that. I'm still quite afraid to do certain things. I used to rollerblade all the time. I haven't
Yeah.
been able
Right.
skiing or skating because I fell and broke my foot in two places. So I have screws in it now, and I've been really like I kind of, you know, I just kind of gave up and thought,
Right.
okay, I guess this is it. I guess I gotta start lawn bowling. But when Ellen and I started talking about the good games and who's coming, I thought, what the hell am I doing throwing in the towel? This is just the beginning. I mean, all the years are behind me that, built up to this sort of like having the confidence and the physical strength to do
Right.
the game.
Right. And
So,
seeing yourself as athletic, right? I mean, that's the thing.
yeah,
It's so easy, especially. So I'm 47, but generations, my mom's generation, my grandma's generation, the concept of a woman being athletic was kind of like, oh, there are certain women who are that way, but the standards that women aren't, right? That's a
yeah,
man's thing, and that our bodies aren't made for that because of our hips or our waistline, or. And so I think that in general, that concept has been a strong force even to current day, that there's still something surprising about women being athletic, right? When we see there's so much growth, obviously, right now in women's sports, thank goodness, the media support, public support,
yeah,
fans, that's way overdue. But also, there's always that little piece of it saying, like, oh, this is really surprising that women can be so athletic, that women can be so
yeah.
active. And seeing women, in the NWSL, the National Women's Soccer League, professional women's soccer, women playing into their 30s. And for men, you'll see some of the really well-known players, or even into their late 30s. There's still kind of this deadline that if you aren't active and athletic and playing a sport, into your 20s and 30s, that there's no chance that you can do it. But I know with the women's soccer community nationwide and even worldwide, women are just starting sports sometimes in their 40s and 50s and 60s.
Yes.
And that has been just amazing to see. It brings so much hope to this concept of how to reframe what women's bodies can do as they age.
I love that. I don't know if you've heard this, but women's NBA basketball is huge here right now in Canada. They are on fire and
Yeah,
selling out stadiums. And I think, even though they might be younger than me, it does reinforce that positive messaging. And I think women, as women, we need to start ignoring that old narrative. And it's really hard to do. It's in our face in the media, in entertainment, and even, our own social communities. Like
right,
I know when I broke my foot, I was 53, and everyone was like, game over. But
right,
it's
right.
not, it's not game over. In fact, the worst thing I could do right now is throw in the towel.
Absolutely. No, it's so true. And I have this particular concept that I advocate really strongly for, and it's tied into this in the sense of how we value youth. So in general, you'll see the term women and the term girl used interchangeably, like as if those words are the same. And so you can just say like the girl at the counter, or the sales girl, or the girl in the office, the girl on the court, right? As if that can be the word woman, and it really isn't, right? A girl is a child, a boy is a child, a woman and a man, and of course we have non-binary folks. But in the end, I go out of my way to make sure that people that I'm in contact with are reminded that the term woman means adult, and that we should be using that as just a comfortable thing to say, that the woman I'm dating, not the girl I'm dating, right? Unless they're underage. So 18, cutting off that adulthood is okay. But I think there's so much charge in this concept that being younger is better for women, right? It's
Yeah.
not necessarily a compliment to call a man a boy, right? If anything,
No.
that would be an insult. But for women to be called a girl, it's like, oh, how sweet that he or she is seeing me as somebody younger. And I think the more we embrace some of these really negative microaggressions about youth and femaleness, that I think if we speak up and start to change our own voice, it's going to make a big difference.
So was this philosophy largely responsible for, starting up the San Diego women's soccer?
I think it was a combination, right? Like one fueled the other. So when I had played soccer, so I was, if you know, Title IX, which in the United States, it was legislation that required in schools, that in public schools, that they had to offer the same types of programs for girls and boys. So this is groundbreaking because that wasn't a concern before. So after Title IX in 1972, after that was enacted, then all of a sudden girls had access to sports because that was one of the school offerings was sports, right?
Yeah.
So I am in the generation, I was born in 76. So by the time I was 5, 6 years old, we had soccer and all different sports available to me. And I was in Southern California growing up. So I just saw it as totally normal that I could get out on a soccer field, a softball field, a volleyball court, and go play whenever I wanted to. There wasn't any understanding that that wasn't available to me. So I think I grew up really just with a standard sense. I think probably again in Southern California being a bit more progressive, that there wasn't for me any real understanding that girls weren't as good as boys. That was just
Yeah.
something that I fortunately even in my own family parenting and my mom played soccer as an adult. So she joined a women's soccer league. My dad was a coach. My dad played adult soccer. So again, I was exposed to it in a really equal way. And it wasn't until then. So I was injured in high school, went to a college that didn't have a sports program at all. So I went between age 17 to 27, not playing any sports, just raising a finishing college, getting job, raising a family, all the kind of standard life things that we expect to see when we're, a cisgender woman, that's how we do it, right? And it
Yeah.
wasn't until late 20s that a friend had said to me, hey, there's women's soccer. You said you used to play. Why are you not playing? And I had no idea. So starting in my late 20s. And then once I was in the women's soccer community and I was exposed to these concepts, way more awareness of the LGBTQ plus community, right? Way more awareness of what we see in racial differences and in ethnic and cultural differences in the women's soccer community. That why are we seeing these types of people and not these? Why are we not inclusive? Why are these separations happening? And at the same time, in some of the sports communities, you do see more inclusiveness than outside of sports, right? And so I
Yes.
started navigating all of that and trying to understand how I can play a role. And I'd say that's when whether or not I had awareness of women's rights and women's equality, and again, talking about women versus girls and how that language makes a difference, I think it was finding my voice and finding the strength and finding my audience. That's when I probably formed the concept and felt really solid about actually vocalizing it.
That's really critical as we do get a bit older. When I was working full time before COVID and all the work from home, my community was mainly built from my colleagues around me and maybe even clients. And then I had my daughter and my community became other mothers. And neighbors. And then my daughter's older now. I don't have to attend play dates or plan them for her. So where's my community now? I'm work from home. My daughter doesn't need me to be
Right, right.
participant in her play dates.
Yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
women have a hard time at this part of life building new communities. And that's why sports are so imperative because that's where we can meet like-minded women and really kind of inspire each other.
Right. And so much about, so the organization that I have at San Diego Soccer Women, so much of it was really how do I bring visibility to what's already happening? So it wasn't at the time. So it was about 14 years ago or so that I had started the website, san diego soccerwomen.com. And then just about 7 years ago that I started social media. And it was like, if I couldn't find the information easily, other women aren't either. And so how do I just increase visibility? And I had enough of a background to set up a website, keep it going, keep it updated. And as I discovered more of what was happening here in the women's soccer community, and this is all recreational grassroots level, this isn't pro soccer, it's just women getting out there to kick around and have a good time. Even at a competitive level, there's still an understanding of being friendly and careful. And like you said, not wanting to have broken bones, right? That we all understand there still is some fragility to at any age, being able to hurt yourself and not able to go to work the next day or care for our family members or something else. So once I started the website and again moving into social media, the community that opened up to me was huge. That again, I wouldn't have known about not only if I hadn't been playing, but if I hadn't been seeking it out in a way to bring it to media attention, bring it out to other people within the San Diego community, and again, then at some point globally. And and learning from the generations of women who did not have access to sports when they were younger. I mean, that it was so much blocked off to them. It wasn't just about, oh, it wasn't, we didn't have neighborhood kickball. It was truly like we weren't allowed to play. You know, the boys told us, go home, you aren't allowed here. And no coach was available, no, you know, no school, no teacher was going to offer this opportunity for girls to play these sports. So to learn these lessons and have these stories come to me, and one of my favorite ones is how the leagues here started about the time I was born. So 45 or so years ago, women started creating leagues and then tournaments nationwide. So that's true in Virginia, it's true in New York, Washington area, down here in San Diego, parts of Texas. So this is not something new that I was like, hey, we should have leagues for older women, right? These were already there. And these were women in their 20s and 30s who saw girls playing, saw, you know, their nieces, their daughters, and they decided they wanted to take this on. So they started all those years ago and they're still playing. You know, a lot of these original founders are still in the game. And for me, again, at the time I started playing in my late 20s, early 30s, seeing these women in their 60s and 70s out there playing the game. So the stories I've heard from them, one is that back then you had one game per week, right? It wasn't like there were 10 different places to play soccer in San Diego County. So you basically had your one game and you were going to make that game no matter what. So you would bring your kids to the field, watch each other's, you know, whether it's an infant or a toddler or elementary age, watch your kids on the sidelines, bring your pets, and women would be breastfeeding on the sideline, put the baby down, go back into the game, come back out, start breastfeeding again, right? Like there was no, I don't have time for this. It was, this is so important to me. I'm going to make sure I can manage the rest of my life to be able to play this sport. So I think of any inspiration, it's realizing that not only did women not have access, but once they did, they worked so hard to make sure to be involved and participate. And like you said, socially, this became their network. Those women who were holding each other's babies, over time, the schoolmates, you know, they had the kids at the same time. So they were, you know, doing carpooling, maybe they were sharing stories about school age kids. And then eventually they were going to the graduations of each other's children. And then eventually, you know, these days they're going to the funeral ceremonies for each other's partners, you know, for family members within those families. So there's so much in it about the connection that's created. And that is both for the individual and for the social health.
I think that's real. It's fascinating, actually, what you said about like playing in a sport, going off to the side of a field and nursing your kiddo, and then going back out. Like, women don't realize how powerful we really are, right? Like,
Exactly.
and that is some mad multitasking.
Right.
Um, it's sad that we say that, you know, equality in sports is progressive. It should be normalized, but that's the goal with what you're doing. And to, you know, just to demonstrate proof that women are aligned with your thinking, can you tell me a bit about, you know, the videos that you've shared about older women in soccer that have garnered like millions of views?
Yes. So definitely one of the fun things about social media. There are so many fun things about social media, just as much as there are negative things, right? But when any of my reels get picked up, it's usually reels, sometimes it's posts, but when they get picked up by much larger organizations and then there's, you know, global viewership, it's a blast. It's so much fun to see it because in the end, it's not about me growing my own audience just for San Diego soccer women, but the concept of bringing visibility to the fact that women are playing soccer at older ages in, you know, full uniforms, full gear. This isn't just, you know, a casual go and kick it and we're done. Like they are playing a game, especially in these tournaments. They're there to win. They're there to get, you know, go home with a medal. So I have a couple of videos over the past few years have gotten really widespread views, but just recently, within the past, I believe about 8 months or so, the organization Just Women's Sports, and they have, I don't even remember now, hundreds of thousands of followers. So they picked up the video. They had checked in with me for permission. I said yes, absolutely. Posted the video, and yes, over 1 million views. And you know, I was counting like, oh my god, 600,000 views. I was posting, are we going to hit 700,000? Then it was like, oh wait, no, we're at 900,000. But the fun thing is to read comments, and of course, there's some of those spammy ones in there, but to see the comments of how many women are tagging other women and saying, this is going to be us in a few years. And some of them are saying, this is us in 20 years. This is us in 40 years, right? I mean, depending on the age of the audience, these are women who are identifying themselves as being lifelong athletes, right? That this isn't their understanding, because I think that's still very misunderstood, that a lot of girls especially are playing, they're doing club soccer, high school soccer. They want to go to the college and play, and then they want to go pro. And we all know the percentage of athletes just in any sport who actually make it to pro, but they also get very burned out. If they don't make it into that college or again into pro, then they think they're done. And I really want to make sure, not only that older women know they have the opportunity to play, but that girls growing up, this isn't the end of the game, that you really don't have to stop there. So on the Just Women's Sports site, and shortly after, ESPNW picked it up. So that same reel went through ESPNW, and again, seeing hundreds and thousands of views, day by day, adding on. And those comments, what was really neat is Sydney LaRue. So she's one of the National Women's Soccer League and NWSL players, really well known. She's amazing on social media, just a great sense of humor. And she ended up posting on one of those, Just Women's Sports posted it twice, but on one of them, she was interacting with one of her teammates on that post. So it was just like, blew my mind and made me thrilled, because again, these women who go out to play in these tournaments, they don't expect to be seen globally. And here they are, giving a lesson to really the rest of the world.
That is such great role modeling, especially like I can imagine if I went right now and played pickleball, I wouldn't expect anyone to know except for my husband and the people I'm playing with. And so
Right.
to see my exercise and my game be used as something that's guiding other women to say you can do this too, that would be such a thrill. One thing I do want to point out, and you can add clarity to this, is I think when people think of older women doing sports, not older men, but older women, they think, oh, that's adorable. And the reality is, I have been able to meet some of the attendees of the upcoming Good Games. They could kick my ass, no problem. And one of them is over 80.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
can you tell me about the age range? Like it's just mind-blowing and it just inspires me. It makes me feel lazy. And I love that because it makes me go, "Oh my God, what am I doing?"
Yeah. Yeah. I think what's really powerful is knowing that a lot of these women, again, who are now playing in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, they didn't start until they were, 30s, 40s, 50s, even some into their 60s. But that also causes a little bit of concern for me. So, I celebrate it and I'm so excited. And I think there's so much power in that. But for my own generation, it's fascinating to think if these women, then their bodies really didn't have all the wear and tear until they were in their 30s. And now, they've been playing for 20, 30, 40 years. What's going to happen to my generation who started at age 5, right? Who
Oh
maybe
yeah.
played, again, I stopped at 17 and had a 10-year break. But for women who did play college, all that wear and tear, are we going to make it to that age? Between knee replacements, hip replacements, all the ACL tears, MCL tears that we've seen in women's soccer,
Yeah.
especially. I have this kind of tenderness about seeing these women out there, because I think statistically there are more women than ever before who have played soccer, right? Just purely for the fact that more girls have played soccer every single year, right? We collectively over time, they've all aged. So women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and older, there's just more of us. Everybody's played at some point in general, right? But we're not seeing an increase to that same percentage. So we're seeing more women choose alternate sports, again, because of the competitive nature of how hard they played, maybe stepping away from soccer and doing more pickleball, CrossFit, again, things like volleyball, but also some up and coming sports like field hockey. And in some areas, we don't have as much in California, but in some areas you see that, just other sports becoming interesting. Softball's a big one for soccer players. And so these women who right now are playing, and we have, I believe, at least 8 teams in the age 70 plus category. So that means a team of at least, so sometimes that's 8v8, other times it's 11v11. So how many players on the field could be either 8 or 11, depending on the tournament. So you see teams of, say, at least 15 women. So all of them having to be 70 years old and older, all playing at these tournaments around the country. So to have that many women right now in that age category, and age 70 plus means absolutely there are women in their 80s. Specifically here in San Diego, we have a handful of women in their early 80s who are, every single week year round, they play. If not once a week, twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. So there's no question that the ability of women's bodies, the ability for women's bodies to age in a way that they can still be active in an actual competitive, high contact sport, right? This isn't pickleball where you don't ever bump into anybody else.
What's your
You are
me?
crashing and hitting the ground pretty often. So I think it does go against what we expect to see in women, in the sense of not only the competition level and the pushing hard and wanting to see each other physically engaged, but again, at that age level, being able to see that as possible. And on top of that, understanding again this concept of how, that this may be a limited time, because women who are now in their 50s and 60s, will we make it to our 80s still playing? And I'm hoping yes. And just a side note is one thing I'm really promoting now is walking soccer. So walking football is a sport that's globally, it's grown about between 5 and 10 years, depending on the region of the world. You've seen this massive expansion. And for me, it's frustrating because, I've over the years, I've been organizing groups of women to go play abroad. So for us, we go to Norway to a famous field to go play, and I have to find local women who will come play with us. We've gone to France during the Women's World Cup and organized games for women to be able to play while we were abroad there. So we did a tournament in Spain, trying to find teams in other countries because women have been playing, US against US and maybe Canadian teams every now and then, an Australian or UK team. But having these global, kind of like the good games where it's this Olympic style international festival, trying to find women over 40 who, in soccer teams who'd be able to travel and meet up to play has been impossible. And then I realized they're all playing walking football. So it ends up that women all over the world are playing soccer. They're just not playing the high contact running soccer. They're playing a version that's no running, ball has to stay. It's usually below shoulder height or hip height, depending on the rules. No tackling from behind. And in general, you're not pushing into each other. Although I've played in Norway, Wales, and England, and there was tons of pushing. So there's still, it's kind of up to the referee, but I think the women in general kind of agree in some of these events that there's a certain level of contact that they're okay with. And then, the rest of the game is same thing, same goals, trying to score and win. So I think that part of what I'm seeing as far as women aging and women being athletic over time is, how can we adapt the sport to make sure we include as many people as possible? And that's true for men also, that,
Mhm.
how can we make sure that women are playing to the level that's safe for them, while still getting the socialization, the fitness, the exercise. And there's so much to be said about doing some contact sports that way, or high impact sports, when it comes to bone strength, muscle strength, joint
Yes.
strength, right? So I think it is, as much as we want to be careful with ourselves and we want to adapt, we also want to keep that competitive edge and make sure we're pushing ourselves. So it's a constant balance, but I think walking soccer is going to fill in some of those gaps. And going back to these women in their 70s and 80s that, they're very offended that I want them to play walking soccer. But, for me, I'm saying, at some point you're going to want to step away from the game, whether it's, sometimes it's things like concussion. So your body may be working perfectly fine, but you can't risk another head injury, right? It may just be that ankle isn't recovering like it should. So at some point, or in addition to regular soccer, move to walking soccer and have that field time, have those teammates, keep all of the joy of the game there, but reduce some of the risk of injury. So see how I do growing that out here.
It's almost like walking soccer is your plan B.
Yeah,
So,
right.
like it's if you do have an injury that does prevent you or is not a good idea for you to carry on and risk further re-injury, walking soccer, like I feel like that's a great alternative.
Yeah.
But I can see if I'm still 80 and strong as hell and out there, I would be like, no, I'm not there yet.
Right, exactly.
It's kind of like,
If you want to travel to Europe and play, though, you just have to do both. That's the
yeah.
key, right? It's giving up one thing for another, but it's always worth it when it comes to just expanding your network, and expanding your opportunities. So yeah, I agree. Though the biggest thing is people just ask, like, isn't it hard to not run? And the answer is yes, but at the same time,
Ah,
it is quick movement. I mean, this is not an easy game. You are still moving as fast as you possibly can. And in some ways, it's harder because we're not used to that kind of a walking stride. You've seen power walkers and race walkers, but to be able to keep that format, it uses muscles we're not used to when we're doing standard running. So I think I like the idea of women being able to shift back and forth. And one thing we don't talk about is, what about all these women who still want to learn to play? What about the women in their 50s, 60s, and 70s who are out there seeing these experienced women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s playing, and they're saying, I want to come learn too. I know, another challenge with San Diego soccer women was, how do I increase this opening for women to come play for the first time? Because we have so much experience, again, 45 years our leagues have been going. There's so much experience already out here on our pitches. And I think that's true nationwide. So for a beginner to come join a league game, it's not safe. It's not safe for the experienced players or the beginner player, because they don't have the same reflex time. They don't have the same, you can't predict how they're going to move because they don't have the same training. So that's one thing between my San Diego soccer women programs and the concept of walking soccer, is how do I just make sure all age women can join in and learn for the first time. And they may, it may take a year until they're up to league play style and they can get in there and play, or it may be a few years that they stay in kind of a beginner casual level play. So I think it's a challenge overall, but it's a great challenge to have, that we're seeing so much interest in women joining and learning for the first time.
So you're younger than me, and I think about, one of the things I think about is when I was in perimenopause, and I'm now postmenopausal. I had some struggles. I still have a lot of struggles, actually. So there's like a pros and cons here for me. So I struggled with some issues around my own health, and I feel like now, had I really understood that I could keep going and I should keep going, it would have changed my experience. So we know that exercise is critical to our mental health, our emotional well-being, but also, like our body, like our bone density, and we need to keep moving. Joint pain can be an issue as we get older. And I'm learning more about plyogenics and why it's really important to, kind of move your body in certain ways that maybe you're not used to. Kind of like what you're saying with like walking, soccer, like you're almost pulling yourself back from sprinting. Like I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Um, so I feel like there's a ton of benefits that way. But do you know of any challenges that women face when they're kind of going through symptoms related to menopause? Like maybe they're having really bad hot flashes or fatigue, brain fog. I don't know,
Yeah.
like, does that impact your reflex time? Like, has that had some sort of an impact that you can think of?
Right. I will say, number one, there is not enough conversation about pelvic floor and
Mm,
women athletes, right? Because
yes.
I can imagine right now there is a very large community of women who would love to be playing sports, but they pee their pants when they try to run or move quickly, right? That's just, whether or not you've had children, part of aging for most women has to do with whether it's pelvic floor prolapse, whether it's just in general not having the same strength. So there can be a wide range of changes within your pelvic floor that affect, your ability to hold your urine in when you're running, kicking, jumping, all of these things. So when it comes to menopause and anything around that, I think that's one thing that I'm working on some additional messaging just within my San Diego Soccer Women's social media. I've met with a local doctor here who specializes in pelvic floor exercises, doing assessments. And she is a runner, and she's in her early 40s and has this concept that women should be out there being athletic, and we can help them, both through exercises and through just kind of understanding their movements, whether it's posture, how they move and how they carry their bodies can affect how pelvic floor works. So that's one thing that. And there are things like pessary. So, looking at non-surgical options, there are pessaries, which are little devices, usually made of silicone, that you can insert to support your urethra. So all of these conversations should be happening not only on the sidelines, right? Like we should be discussing them, but even part of the larger women's sports community, and podcasts like yours, it's exactly what we should be talking about is, what are these things that uniquely being female, that, our bodies are the way we move and the way we function, how is that affecting our opportunity to play? So that's one thing. And I do know definitely part of the dynamic of being on a women's soccer team, or I think a women's sports team in general, is being able to have conversations about our bodies in ways that most people don't, that's kind of an open invitation. If we're complaining about knee pain, we can also complain about hot flashes. We can also complain about, bodies changing, and even conversations about sexuality, conversations about more intimate details. That is something that it becomes a safe space because there's so much around our physicality, being teammates on a soccer team. So I think that there's been a ton of research, I know, within the past 2 years around menopause, and specifically soccer, walking soccer. That research came out, I believe, from University in Wales. There's a university in Denmark that's been focusing on older adults and soccer, and how that affects not only their long-term health, starting at ages 60 and older, but immediate changes to how, like you said, bone density, muscle strength, joint movement, how all of that can be affected in a positive way, and way outweighs the risk of injury, really, the positive benefits physically. And then again, the organization in Denmark is working with women who have undergone breast cancer treatment, and how soccer has actually improved their health beyond someone in a control group who hasn't been playing soccer as part of their recovery. So I think there's a lot to be said about, beyond the healthy version of a woman playing soccer at an older age, that even women who are being impacted by something like menopause, that there are benefits that are going to absolutely bring significant improvement in what they're seeing as symptoms.
So, sorry, just to back up there, you said that, okay, so in Denmark, they've discovered that women with post-surgical menopause get more benefit th playing soccer. Now, do you mean soccer specifically, or contact sport, or, exercise?
Right. The research of Denmark was post-surgical cancer. So it was breast cancer, not menopause, is
Oh,
what you just
sorry,
said.
right,
So yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I was just mixing the two research studies. So the group with cancer, then they were seeing improvement in their recovery, playing soccer specifically. So I
Oh,
believe in the research, they would be able to expand that to understand how other sports might make a difference, because it wasn't just about being on a team. It was the actual physical movement of playing the
mhm.
sport. And I don't know why they chose that sport specifically, except that the director of that research center is involved in soccer already. So I think
Right.
that just made sense, to be able to do that. So yeah, absolutely though. And the menopause study, out of Wales, then that one, I haven't read the details to understand medically, but definitely the improvement, again, against a control group. See, and they use soccer specifically, but I believe that most sports would be similar.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, just to clarify, because I am very good at confusing people, I meant like when women go through post-surgical, like cancer, breast cancer, any kind of, cancer, they
Yeah.
tend to go into menopause
Gotcha.
immediately.
Sorry. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
sorry. I love to confuse people with that. Um,
It's beyond my technical level. So yes, I got it.
but one thing I stress all the time, because I still find women are undereducated about pelvic floor physio, is that I think in North America we've been fed a story that urinal incontinence is normal. It is common, but it is not normal. And I really encourage women to look into this, because it's very limiting for women. And I know a lot of women who've given up running in certain sports because of it. And, like once you give up sports, if you're athletic or not, or, give up walking or running, that's like that's when we tend to decline, right? Like even our mental health can decline quickly from there. So I think it's important for women to look into this, because like as you've said, whether it's a pessary or other treatments, this is a very confusing area. Like women don't understand the difference between an overactive and an underactive pelvic floor, both of which can cause incontinence. So if you have an overactive floor and you just do Kegels, you are exasperating the situation. So it's really important to understand what's happening with your pelvic floor, as you would with any muscle in your body that's underperforming or overperforming, and, trying to get it into a place where you feel more comfortable. And I know that from my own pelvic floor physio, I've been able to stop many of the issues that I was having. So, Like we need to push women to really understand this. I want to talk a little bit about something you had mentioned to me in our first conversation a few months ago. And you talked about, you know, women's relationships with our bodies, like the physical, mental, you mentioned economic and emotional health. Like that's really, really important. I think it's even more important as we age and we are up against stigmas and taboos, misinformation, lack of information, and lack of healthcare support. That can really, really um, put us into a spiral if we don't know what's happening with our bodies, we don't know where to go, and we don't know how to get help. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of our, our relationship with our body in those terms?
I think going back to the beginning of the conversation, whether you have broken bones when you play sports or not, that seeing ourselves as athletic, that our bodies have purpose that's beyond entertainment. And this is so much, how we see beauty, right? And going back to the concept of youth, right? That we see women as having this external value. And when we pull back from that and say, we're not out here to entertain you, we're not here to look pretty, we're not here to, give you some visual stimulation, that we are here to exist, to take our own space, to be who we are. And part of that is going out on a soccer field in, shorts of any length we want,
Yes.
usually longer, because if we slide, we will get horrible, cuts on our legs, raspberries, we call them, right? So, being able to wear whatever shirt is comfortable, whether it's a tighter fitting or looser fitting shirt. We've got our shin guards, our socks pulled up, our cleats are on, right? Hair's pulled back in most cases. This is not to be attractive to anyone. It's to play the game.
Yeah.
And I think that lesson in itself, that some women choose to wear makeup out on the field, some women are coming straight from work and their hair looks great, right? Like it doesn't matter what the appearance ends up being one way or the other, that to be in a space without judgment, that we get to show up to practice or game or tournament and just go and play and work hard. And whether we have cellulite that's exposed when we're kicking a ball, whether we have
Yeah.
flabby arms that show in our tank top, that is so beside the point, that doesn't change our ability to score a goal, to block a goal, to be a great defender. And realizing that at a younger age is even more valuable. But at this point, I'll take it. If in my 40s or 50s or 60s, I'm going to come to terms with the fact that my body doesn't look the way society, conveys to me that it should look, that it doesn't move exactly the way that I jiggle in places, or I have way more muscle than a lot of those women who are on stages, singing or dancing or whatever else, right? That all these body types, they can all be out on the same field doing their job. So I think there's so much value for girls and boys to see women at older ages, especially, exposing themselves in a vulnerable way by playing soccer, and that exposure again isn't entertainment. It isn't about showing some sense of sexuality or sensuality. It's really about being a soccer player and playing the sport in the way that makes the most sense for that body. So I think,
Yeah.
that's and that doesn't take away from the fact that some women have a really strong sense of femininity, that some women have a really strong sense of what it feels like for them to experience their own womanhood, that those can be at the same time that you're sweating on a soccer field and also feeling feminine, that you can have, again, whatever body type it is and dress the way you want, and that still allows you to be an athletic soccer player in whatever form that looks like for you.
Sports have really got to start taking into consideration women's bodies because perimenopause can start in your mid 30s. I mean, and depending on, your situation, it can start earlier. But, why do women have to wear white tennis skirts? I mean, that's ridiculous. And don't even get me started on the bathing suit issue.
Yeah.
But
Well, in volleyball, I mean, the buns, they call them buns, right? Those tiny shorts. And I
yes,
think what we don't acknowledge is that there are plenty, especially teenage, but plenty of girls who will not play a sport because they don't want to be seen in those outfits.
yes, because
And
they
then there,
don't even want to wear bathing suits, for God's sakes. You're going to put them in a,
exactly.
yeah. And
Exactly. And then on the other side, that you have girls who are playing in these outfits and feeling this sense of empowerment, for all the wrong reasons, right? That
Yeah.
they're being looked at more than usual, that men are, parents, right? That they're getting all this adult attention. And these are, again, high schoolers or middle schoolers that, it really messes with their brains of what it feels like to be part of something and to be, given attention. That if boys don't need to wear tiny shorts to play volleyball, girls don't, there's nothing
Yeah, you know what? Your
anatomically
movement is
necessary.
Yeah, your movement's the same without those bloody shorts. And I remember playing in a league in high school, and we went down to play against a team in the US, and I got my period that week. And I was quite young, like I think I was 14, and I wasn't using tampons yet, so I had to wear a maxi pad. Do you remember
Right?
pads? Does anyone
Oh yeah,
remember pads?
right, right.
In those tiny shorts. I look like a sumo wrestler. It was ridiculous. Like it impacted my game so
Right.
badly because all I could think about was everyone can see this pad, and if it starts leaking, game over.
Exactly, exactly. No, it's true. And it actually, I have a similar story that I've only told a couple people because it's
Oh
like I
no, it's a
always,
podcast,
yeah,
remember?
here we go, here we go. And it's so, I've only recently have been thinking more about this because of working now with a few younger women when I was playing at the community college recently. And it was specifically having to do with my period. So I was a young teenager and had made it to the level to do state tryouts. So in California, we traveled with my team, and my parents hadn't gone with me, but my coach and his wife were great people and, really involved in being able to make sure all of the players on their team were, just being able to feel comfortable and do what they need to do to be there at these tryouts. So I had driven up with them, and I got my period while I was there and had horrible stomach cramps. And same thing, ended up bleeding all over my shorts and was unprepared. But I also didn't tell anyone. And so even though this, my coach and his wife had made it so comfortable for me to be able to say, hey, can you go grab, can we go to the market real quick, or can I go get different shorts? Can I borrow? I kept completely quiet and then pretended I had a knee injury so I could just stop the tryout.
Oh,
Yeah, so
oh,
I went to the physio, they checked my knee out, they said nothing's wrong, and I was like, "Well, it hurts." And I was, all locked up to make sure my knees were together so they couldn't see that my shorts had blood on them, right? I mean, it's such a
oh.
classic case that even though I was in a safe situation, there still was all the shame and all the embarrassment that my body, right, as a girl, a young woman, right, that I had, I was not in the same state that everyone else was. And I did. I just, I feigned injury, I pulled out and never had my chance to try to play at that level. So
Oh, that sucks. That
yeah,
really sucks. I feel that. Yeah, I think moving forward, I played through high school and university. I didn't know anybody, and I didn't want to start playing on a university team because of my period. I mean, I was obviously wearing tampons by then, but I'd had some accidents, like
yeah,
as
right.
girls do with heavy flows, and yeah, it turned me off. I only started playing again like 15, 20 years ago and stopped before COVID, but I want to get out and play again.
Right.
Um, and you're inspiring me to get out and play again.
Worth it, right? It's worth it.
It's worth it. Um, I'm really looking forward to meeting you in real life
Yes, yes,
this
exactly.
summer at the Good Games, and I'm gonna share the information to your site and your community. I'd love to share some of your videos because I know just watching that, you don't even need to be athletic. I just watch that and I think, okay, seriously, what am I doing? What am
Right.
I not doing?
Exactly, exactly. And to communicate also to audiences that it does hurt, right? You do get sore and you do feel stiff and like there's discomfort around being active, but even that, right, with stretching and keeping yourself flexible, like that will get easier. And don't give it one try or two tries and then give up, right? Like if
Uh,
you're just starting or starting back after a while, give yourself time to adapt. Even psychologically, it takes a bit to get to that point that some of that fear, I have a woman who started coming during the pandemic to these training sessions I was putting on for beginners or returning players. We did, masks, kept our distance, and she's a doctor, and she had never really played sports, but she was scared to death of hurting herself. And it took her a full year, and then she, on purpose, started learning to fall and colliding into people and realizing she's not going to break the first time she hits the
yes.
ground. So I think that messaging too is be inspired by what you see, and also know it's not easy to get to that point, but you'll get there with enough practice and enough confidence, and that'll grow as you keep playing.
Oh my God. Okay, so I'm not gonna let you go. I had shiatsu done a few months ago,
Okay.
and when I was talking to him about my treatment, his name's Alex, and he's like a really good movement therapist, and he was saying, one of the biggest problems we have as we age is that our center of gravity gets higher. We sit down to tie our shoes instead of bending over. Like we do all these things to compensate because we think we're old. And he said, and that ties in directly to, hip replacements, a broken hip, and a fall that happens when we're older. And those falls lead to early death, permanent hospitalization, permanent injury. Um, and really, we can help mitigate that by keeping our center of gravity lower and, getting up off the floor. Like I watch the Blue Zone, so I'm all about sitting on the floor now. But keeping that, it's not just about the lower center of gravity, it's keeping those muscles strong to get up off the floor so that your tolerance, like for your center of gravity as you're falling, your muscles are kicking in at a longer period of time, the lower you get. So you're actually falling a shorter distance. So when you said that, I'm probably not explaining this very well. It made me think of that, like these women like crashing into each other and learning to fall. Like that's really important to know that. And we don't think of that as a life skill, but we really do need that when we get older.
Yeah, how to fall safely, right? I mean, that is
Yeah.
something, how to roll and how to cope with that discomfort of the pain, that you're not injured, it just hurts to hit the ground, and then you're able to get up, check on yourself, and keep moving. And it happens probably 10 times a game, whether it's getting hit in the face with the ball, tripping on grass. No one will be around, and you'll trip and fall. And again, crashing into each other, a late kick. You mentioned earlier about reflex time, right? Definitely older populations. I could put someone in their 20s and someone in their 60s, maybe same fitness level even, but when it comes down to it, the reflex time is what makes the difference of who can get to the ball first, who can kick it first, who can pull the ball out from the feet of the other person. So all of those things lead to, you know, again, hitting the ground or falling or, tripping, things like that. And not beating ourselves up over it, right? That it's okay. And everyone's good about, hey, stop the game, check on each other, laugh it off, and keep going if you're okay, or go take a break. That's fine too. So I think that, I don't know as much as what you're saying as far as center of gravity. And I think that's fascinating and a really good lesson, because it reminds me, I'm always the person who requires group photos everywhere. Like every team, every time we're anywhere, okay, group photo, and everyone's like, oh, not again, right? And I'm going to take 5 of them just in case one's not good. And the big joke about it, and that's true with older men and older women, is like, oh no, don't make us sit on the ground because we'll never get up, right? But even kneeling on the ground, it's like this slow process. And these are people out there playing soccer. They're out there being physical and kicking the ball, but that concept of moving to the ground and getting back up, it's no joke. And if it's already this challenging, again, 50s, 60s, 70s for someone who's athletic on a daily basis, I can't imagine choosing or not having the choice to physically have to stay sedentary and not being able to move your body like that.
Yeah, I think that I would choose the physical pain of being out in the field and being bumped around over having my SI joint lock up, losing my mobility and just feeling like, osteoporosis kick in because I'm not doing anything for my body. That hurts a lot more, and that's permanent. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah, exactly. In addition to things like weight gain, and you don't have to be super slim to be a soccer player. Again, all different
no.
weight bodies can move around and play the game. But if most of us were to just completely stop playing, there would be weight gain, right? Because we're used to whatever diets we eat and whatever quantities. So that's, and the additional pressure on the joints, the additional weight to carry is more on your body. So I think it again goes hand in hand that the healthier we are, the healthier we are. And if that means playing soccer, if that means keeping active and taking some risk of injury, but then you're also, worldwide, globally, we're all seeing ourselves staying healthier because of it. I think that that's going to make a big difference. And definitely for my own self, and I'm plant based. So that's another element that is always interesting is, when I hear conversation about making sure to have enough meat, enough protein, and they're eating eggs, and the doubts around being able to be older and athletic, to burn that many calories and to keep muscle strength. And on top of it, with things like perimenopause, right? Being able to manage all of that and, hear conversations, I think it's also another element that's been important to communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the way you make me think. I like the way you're making women think about this. So I can't thank you enough for joining me.
Thank
And
you.
I'm gonna do a video when I meet you this summer.
That
I'll
sounds
share
great.
it.
Looking
Yeah, we
forward
won't
to
be on
it.
the Zoom frame. We'll be on a soccer field. Well, you will.
Exactly. That sounds great.
Thank you, Brandy.
Thank you.